Hi there, this is Michael Becker, and welcome to this session as we dig into trying to understand the personal data and identity marketplace, where it is both today as well as where it's going in the future. With me today is Jessica Dittmer, and she is the CMO of PolyPoly. Jessica, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Welcome. Thanks for the invitation. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. So as I was doing some research in this effort to understand the current state of the personal data and identity marketplace, I came along and came across PolyPoly, and I was really interested in learning more because you're going into this future state of personal data and identity in the sense of you're leveraging these decentralized identity technologies, which I want to talk about and hopefully you'll define for us. And you're kind of going that direction, this new path for the industry. But before we go there, I kind of want to start with the views of where do you think we are now? You know, like and you know, what problem do you see that exists in the market today, which was the jumping board for where PolyPoly is going. So let's start with that question. Where are we now when it comes to the personal data and identity marketplace? What's happening that you see, and what problems do you see exist in the market today to which personal data and identity is being used?
Yeah, I think always when you think about the data economy and what we are talking about is the data economy, you always have to see this from three sides. On the one hand, the governmental side, so what the states are doing with the data and what is the impact of the data economy in regarding the states. When I look here, there we have the problem that, for example, Europe have lost most of its data capital. And that means that Europe, even with the GDPR, is out of control. The governments are out of control of a lot of data. So they can't protect the citizens like they should be. On the other aspect, you have the economy itself. And when you think about losing the data capital from Europe to a few companies, most of them sitting in the USA, then this is something that harms our economy in Europe as well, and in other countries even, because there are data capital is something that makes the digitalization flow. So a lot of business models stick to data capital. And if you don't have this capital, that means it harms your business models, or other people or other companies can stick deep into your business processes. That's the economy side. On the third hand, we have let me say, the data producers, the citizen side. And there you have to have a look as well. What we are doing here right now, we are giving out our privacy, and we always forget and don't have in mind that privacy is something like not something like it is a human right. And we are giving it out for free, just to getting back free services and better ads. And when I bring this in a conclusion, I come here and say, okay, we have at the moment a data economy that doesn't just harm us as users or us as citizens, it even harms our states and it harms our economy as well. And this is a point where we say, okay, we really have to change fundamentally how we work with data, how we economize data, how we earn money with data, how we treat data. But if we want to change this, then we have to have a look on all the three players on the market. It doesn't work when we just have a solution for one player.
It's interesting too, and actually that's exactly the conversation I was having when you jumped onto the Zoom call with my other colleague, and that I will often talk about when I look at the personal data marketplace exchange, I call it the Identity Nexus, where you have three public actors, or you have three primary actors. You have the people, you refer to them as citizens. You have what I call public institutions. You just referred to them as government. But I think there are many more public institutions beyond just government, like schools and other types of entities. And then you have what I call the private institutions. And the overlap of those three institutions, people, public, and private, there will be an intersection point to which I call the identity nexus, where we need to find that equilibrium state where we're using personal data and identity within society for society to benefit as a whole, without any one of those groups taking on the lion's share of the profits, if you will, or the benefit, and putting more risk on any one of those shares. And
Yeah.
right now, it seems like, as of late, when we look at the popular news, and please refute this if you don't agree with me, when we look at the popular news, it feels like the private institutions are taking the lion's share of the benefit to the detriment of the government and the people.
Yeah, it's a bit like, let me say it like this. Sorry when I get so direct, but I think GDPR is a really awesome law and it's something that's really, really valuable. But working with the GDPR as a company is a pain in the ass.
Yes.
So in the end, this is something we want to protect the people, and that is a good way. And it's pretty perfect that we are aware of that we have to protect our people as well.
Mm-hmm.
But we can't do it in a way that it harms our economy in the end, and that it feels always like a diet. So, for example, when I'm as a user, I go to the internet, and of course, I have all these cocky mentions and things and stuff like that everywhere. And of course, me as Jessica are very aware about the data privacy issue because I'm working in a company taking care of this. But even when I'm surfing in the internet, I want to see something fast. And then comes all the windows and I have to declare what kind of data I want to share or not. And it's so often that I say, oh God, fuck off, come on.
Exactly.
I accept whatever it is. So I compare all of this situation always with a diet. When I'm doing a diet, I know I want to do a diet and it's very important for me that I don't eat sweets. And then there comes this double chocolate cake with this hot chocolate inside, and that it was with my diet. And as long all the privacy stuff work for users like a diet, for companies like something that harms their businesses, it won't work and it won't get a change. So this is something we really have to change. It must be like something that works intuitive, natural, and it must be so clear at the moment you join the internet that your privacy is protected, even without that you don't have to do anything. Because at the moment to protect your privacy as a user in the internet or as a user of a phone like this or as a user of an app, you need to know a lot about data privacy. So it feels like you have to study a bit a kind of law. And on the other hand, you have to generate a lot of knowledge about technology to understand all of this. But how it works and where you can get harmed. But when we think about a normal user, when we think about people's like your moms and your dads, or even your children, they don't have the know-how, the technical know-how, they don't have the legal know-how. And when you come home after an 8 or 9 hours workday, just want to have some fun in the internet, it can't be that you are the person who is responsible to protect your own privacy in a field where we don't have enough know-how to really be safe to act here.
Right. And unfortunately, industry today says, well, you gave me consent, and so that means I can do with it whatever I want. But what I hear you saying is, well, no, because I don't have the background, I can't actually give that consent, right? When I give consent, I don't know what you're going to do with the data. I don't know what the risks are. I just, I don't, know what the, let alone the short-term benefit or risk is, let alone the long-term benefit or risk are, and you've got hundreds of lawyers who are in the business of making sure that you benefit when I say yes, whereas I just have me. So I don't really know what to do when I say yes, or what the implications are that. And what I hear you saying is you're saying it's kind of, you're putting that individual, that person in a very unfair position.
Yes.
Yeah. When they're, and that's just not the right way. So to summarize, what I hear you saying is the personal data economy now is one where we have all of this data being collected about us, by us, produced by us, which is then being consumed by industry, Industry is then profiting from that, and then the implications or challenges of that for is the individual person can be harmed, but also the nation states can be harmed because information about their citizens or about their economies can be damaged, especially when that information, for instance, is being pulled from one country to another through these commercial entities. And that creates a lot of political power and political issues and dynamics that we don't necessarily need to go into right now. But that's what I hear you saying. So those are the challenge. And then I do want to hear one other summary. One other summary point is I heard you say, the regulations we're putting in are great, and I think in spirit what I'm hearing you say is they're recognizing that this data about the individual subject, aka the human right, is of tremendous value. But as a company, adhering to those regulations is difficult and is unwieldy and is challenging, to say the least, and is costly and expensive. And so what I hear you saying then is in the current state of the marketplace, there's no doubt this data has value. There's no doubt that we need to find a way to use it well. We're doing the best we can with our current regulatory framework, but that framework may not be as easily implementable as we'd hope.
And more or less. So I think the framework is pretty good. The problem is at the moment that you need to bake this framework into technology. And this is what's the missing step at the moment.
Got it.
And this is what we are doing right now. The idea of baking GDPR into technology so that it's something that is so natural, like clicking a link to YouTube and watching video or open a Zoom link. And to make one thing crystal clear as well is we as PolyPoly are not against collecting data. Data are really, really valuable. Not just on the one hand, think of all the products and services we love to use, that we get our packages at home, that we can have food delivery and so on. For all of this, data are needed. On the other side, data are really, really valuable when it comes to scientific approaches. When we think about our current pandemic situation, data is extremely valuable to fight pandemic or coordinating aid in an event of disaster. So to make this clear, data, collecting data and working with data and getting insights out of data is nothing that is evil. The question is what data are needed and how they are treated. And if we really need to collect everything that we can find, because sometimes I got the feeling it's a bit like we have a mantra. Is this the correct word in English? Mantra? Yeah, I think so. Yep. We have something like a mantra, collect and collect and collect and collect, and perhaps you will find a gold nugget inside.
Right.
And this mantra is fundamentally wrong. Because what is the value is in the end not the data. When we really think about it, the value is not the data. The value is the insights we can generate out of the data. Mm-hmm. So in my point of view, it doesn't make sense to collect all the data when we just want to have the data insights. Why we don't stop with collecting data and sharing data from A to B and start sharing algorithms to the data, not the other way around, and then just collecting the data insights. Because today's data economy is built like this. You're taking the data, you're collecting them on central servers or clouds, and behind clouds there are again servers. So the data always go to central points. And they go to central points so that algorithm can generate the data insights out of it. If we just turn this upside down and said, okay, we leave the data where they are on our personal devices because we are the producers of personal data. And these devices, here, we produce all the stuff. Why we just turn it upside down and send the algorithms to where the data are and just let the whole data economy run with the data insights, and just the data insights must leave a device. And when we just turn this upside down, we solve most of the problems regarding privacy issues. And and for the economy, we are solving a lot of problems they have with the GDPR at the moment, because data insights are GDPR compliant per default. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to states, there we solve, for example, the tax issue, because at the moment data don't stop at borders. They go flowing worldwide. When we take care that the data always stays on the end devices of the data producer, so of our end devices, then it's clear where is the place the taxes has to be paid.
Yes.
It is clear which law is in charge. So in the end, the idea of PolyPoly is extremely simple in the first step. Leave the data where they are, stop sharing data and start sharing these algorithms, and then we will solve a lot of problems.
Okay, and I completely agree with you. Have you ever heard of a gentleman by the name of David Husby?
And I'm really bad in names.
Okay, so David is part of the self-sovereign identity movement, and he's one of the kind of preeminent thought leaders in this field. And he's actually termed the concept of authentic data. And he was just talking about this very point that you're raising right now in a paper I read about 2 weeks ago, where he was raising the issue of associating identity with, say, my personal information of my vaccine status. And he says, we've got to separate those two. And the way to do that is to basically do exactly what you said, right? You do the processing on a local endpoint so that when I go into, say, an establishment, a restaurant, if you will, and they say, are you vaccinated or not? Today I need to disclose a lot of information. Who I am, yes, I'm vaccinated. Here's my, depending on the credential I need to present, here's my address, etc. What David is suggesting and what you're suggesting in this model is someone doesn't need any of that information. All they need is the insight that, yes, this human being is vaccinated, yes or no. You, the restaurant, don't need to know anything else. I should be able to eat anonymously in your restaurant without you knowing everything about me. And that I think that's what you're saying. Is that not correct?
That's exactly what I'm saying. It's the same, for example, when you think about that websites where just websites or games or something just be approached by grown-up persons over 18. I don't need information if the person is 14, 42, or 86. I just need the information. Is this a grown-up or not? Yes or no?
Yeah.
And that's the difference between data and data insights in my mind.
Yeah, I agree. So what we're seeing then is you see the evolution of the marketplace moving towards this idea that the producer of the data, aka the individual, should be in control and effectively be the owner of that data, if you will. And therefore, when an entity, whether or not be government or private, wants to interact with me, they send my devices or my system an algorithm that says, this is the information I need from you to be able to make a decision. And then it spits back a yes or no, or okay, or a credit number, or whatever the algorithm is suggesting. Now, one question I have for you on that, and this is more of an implementation one more than anything else. When we talk about endpoints and devices, like analyzing the data on this device or analyzing the data on that device, my personal data still, are we really talking about it on this device, or are we talking about it being on a data store in a data cloud to which I am totally in control of? Because I wouldn't necessarily be able to have all of the data that whatever algorithm is needed to make a decision solely on that smartphone, right? Because my data set might be too big for the memory stack that happens to be sitting on this smartphone. So is there not a slightly different nuance there? There actually is a personal cloud to which all of my devices interact with. So when the insight comes in, it hits my device, and then my device goes to my personal cloud, wherever central engine to wherever my data happens to be residing, that says perform the analysis that's needed.
To make one thing clear, I'm not the perfect person to answer this question because I'm not a technical.
Got it.
So that is something
Yeah,
our technical can explain much better. But in the end, what we are doing here, of course, we are matching your different devices. At the moment, we are just on the cell phone right now.
Sure.
And make clear there's a lot of storing capacity on such a cell phone. That's one point, and there's a lot of computing power on a cell phone. It's normally quite enough. We are just using around about 5% of our computing power. 95% of our computing power is not used in Europe, for example.
Okay, I love that. That's a great statistic. Do you have a reference for that, by the way? I really like that.
For sure, I can send it afterwards.
Okay.
As I sent you a lot of references already.
Yeah,
but
so
of course,
that's really good. So the idea is then I'm going to store all of my data on my local device for this discussion now. Let's just say it's all here on my phone. And then when I want to run a transaction with a particular entity, they'll send that algorithm to my device and start processing data. And if my data store on my device doesn't have all of the necessary information that the algorithm's looking for, what would happen then? Would the experience then say, hey, we're almost done, but you need to provide us a few more bits of data to be able to make a decision? How does that work?
Yeah, that is something that is possible. But in the end, the PolyPot is an IoT app. So at the moment, we are just on the cell phone, but because we are just at the beginning. Yep. But in the end, we want to build up the PolyPot on every digital device so that we have it, for example, on a PlayStation or on a refrigerator, I don't know. And
sure.
For example, cars are really interesting.
Sure.
And then there will be a way that your PolyPot that is on different devices communicates here. So that has two reasons. One hand is to get, of course, enough storing power. That's one point. And the other point is, for example, there's an algorithm coming and he needs a lot of energy. And at the moment I see, oh, your cell phone is just on 10%. So that's the situation. Normally everybody gets nervous when he has a cell phone on 10%. Then, of course, the algorithm won't use the computing power of the cell phone. Then, for example, you can jump over to using the computing power of the PlayStation. I think that's the most bored out device in most households. So in the end, this is a concept that is nothing really new. When you think about ZT at home, for example, do you remember? Mm-hmm. Perhaps for the listeners to explain, there's a project the idea was to find ET, and for that they need to analyze a lot of data. Mm-hmm. And because they don't have the money and they don't have the supercomputer needed, they came up with the idea that they build up a screensaver so people can install on their computers. It was round about in the 90s, I think. Hopefully I'm not wrong, but round about in the 90s, they can take the screensaver on their computer, and always when the screensaver turns on, then he starts analyzing data from the city project. So this is a really, really old concept, using the computing power of different devices, of different people, to bring it together as a force for one of the biggest supercomputers you can imagine.
Right. And so what I hear you saying is, you used a term that I like, the PolyPot, right? So the idea, from what I'm hearing, is, once I install the PolyPoly capability on my different devices that I own and I'm in control of, each one of those devices will have its own localized data store, particularly for the data that's being collected and generated by that particular device in my life. Then each one of those devices within will then communicate cryptographically, securely, only totally under my control with each other. And so that way, that's where that answers the question that I had earlier. If if the data is missing, and for instance, for the algorithm, that algorithm could go, oh, I know where that data is. That's over on his computer, or that's over on her PlayStation, or that's over on here. And so the mesh network is where all decentralized within my own personal cloud, if you will, of devices for me to, for my devices to be able to be managing all of my data.
And perhaps we can do something really, really old school. Ask the people.
Or ask them. Well, and that was my point. So when the algorithm, when the algorithm hits when the algorithm hits a stop and it says, look, I'm missing some data, it could then pop up a form and say, okay, can you please provide me the information that's missing? And so I get it. So so I do really see this kind of new model that you're approaching, and there are others that are doing that similarly, like DigiMe is another one that has a similar idea, but they're doing it from a centralized data store where I'm really intrigued by the way you're doing it. Is you're providing a decentralized distributed mesh network of data across all of my devices,
and we gave it
a really unique way.
I think that's the other important thing. It's not just a technical project. We give it in the power of the people, because we have found 3 companies. One of the companies is a cooperative, an European cooperative. That's the first one right now. The intellectual property of the PolyPot, so the technology, so the platform for the new ecosystem, we placed in the co-op. So we gave away our power over the technology, which is, by the way, open source. You can already find it in the GitHub. And in the cooperative, it's always a rule, one head, one road. Everybody, but just natural persons from Europe, can get member of the cooperative. That means they get co-owner of the technology. That means in the end, we are giving right now the platforms for the new data economy in the hands of the citizens. And who has the platform, who owns the platform, makes the rules. So our concept is wide more than just the technology stack.
Yeah, and I've heard this a lot. Other terminology in the industry, I hear this as civic unions is a common term, or data unions is a common term, where the infrastructure is essentially given to the co-op, to the cooperative, to the data union, to the civic union, and then they then collectively get to choose how and when the data within that collective is actually used. But again, that creates a whole new, really an exciting social model and business model around this core asset to which we opened up the dialogue about, our data, to really transform how the future of society will work.
Hopefully. So in the end, it makes a lot of impact. It can have a lot of impact in the end. So of course, I think one important point is to understand the cooperative doesn't make the rules in direction of what you are as a person doing with the personal data. So you can use a PolyPot without being a member of the co-op. This is something that's completely separate. That's one point. And we thought long about if we do something like having a foundation or doing something like a classical data trust, who goes and says to every citizen, okay, this is the right way or this is the wrong way. And we really choose to go another way, because in the end, to data sovereignty means that you decide what is happening to your data. And that means as well that you are free to do mistakes. So if you go there and say, okay, I want to give my data to Facebook, or I want to do it in the net or whatever, it's your decision. Nobody else should make rules for you how you treat your personal data and your private sphere.
So, and again, so what I'm hearing then too is there are controls within the PolyPoly network and within the PolyPot app that would allow me to say, hey, algorithm, come to me. I'll send you out. I'll send you the insight or the decision you're asking for. However, if you're actually asking for the granular raw data, like what's my birth date, not just am I over 21, then I have the ability to, as a user, to say, yeah, no problem. Here you go.
Yeah, of course.
So I have that. I have the ability to have, total granular control from just high level insight down to most raw level of data to exchange with an individual.
So in the end, you have 3 points where you can say yes or no. You can, if somebody wants to send an algorithm to your device, you can have a look and say yes or no. then you can see which data this algorithm wants to analyze. And there's the next point where you can say yes or no. And then you see what are the data inside the algorithm evaluated. And this is the third point where you can say yes or no. Perhaps you don't like the insights, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, and when you make a concept like that, then two things are really, really important. The first thing is, and first question, what maybe came to your mind, isn't it really, really complex for the user to take care of all the things and take care of who is coming to my device, who is sending algorithm or not? And the second question is, why should I do it?
Yes.
So in the end, so I will start with the second question first. Why should I do it? In the end, what we are doing here is that we are offering the industry and even public service and so on, computing power. And computing power costs money. So in the end, what we are generating here for the users is a digital income, not by giving out their data. We are not monetizing data. We are monetizing computing power. That's a big difference. Why we are doing this? Because what we don't want to have is that in the end, that people who have a lower income get forced to sell out their privacy. If you have privacy or not should never be a question of if you are a rich person or if you are a poor person. This must be always your free decision. And what we find out in the data is interesting as well. When it comes about computing power, normally, as poor as the people get, so when we talk about of Europe, not about people starving or something, then mostly they have a lot of computing power.
Yeah, and iPhone's an iPhone, right? Even the
iPhones,
lowest iPhone has more computing power than sending people to the moon and back, right? There's a lot of computer there.
And a lot of other devices. They have, and normally they have a huge amount of entertainment devices at home. So that means in the end that at the moment when I look at the numbers in Germany, that the people who earn less money have a lot of computing power to sell, to offer on the market. And this is a social aspect as well. To make this clear, just selling computing power, never sell the data.
Okay.
So, and the other aspect was the question, what was the second question?
Well, no, you were saying that there were 2 points. The one point of the market was for me to be able to sell my computing power.
Yeah.
And then what was the other point? I didn't write it down. We should analyze. What is the result?
If it's complicated.
Yeah, is it complicated? That's right.
If you think now of the model of a classical data trust, a data trust is doing something like he's giving you a recommendation of what to do and what is the best way to whom you work. You can imagine the PolyPot like thousands of data trusts in just one app, because we are making possible that you can give recommendations. So that, for example, a government say, okay, these are trust patterns. And we are talking about trust patterns right now, that a government, for example, say, this is our trust pattern of, for example, Denmark, and everybody who comes in the trust pattern, you can trust as well. But then perhaps there are people, they don't trust their government. They like more, for example, to trust a Chaos Computer Club. Of course, Chaos Computer Club can build a trust pattern as well. The mechanism behind is, I love to make it always with the example of my health insurance.
Yeah.
I have a health insurance since I'm grown up. And imagine who says which health insurance I should take. That was my mom. And when it comes to health insurance and stuff like that, I always trust my mom, because that's completely clear. When it comes, for example, regarding which computer I should buy, Mom, I love you, but I won't trust you here. This is something I will ask somebody else. So it's a completely natural behavior that you say regarding the situation, you trust other persons or other institutions. So when we come back, for example, to Chaos Computer Club, I will trust them when it comes to privacy, but I won't trust them if they give me, for example, tips how to cook my dinner.
Right. Okay. Okay.
And this is how we solve this. And with this trust pattern, it makes it pretty easy that you say, okay, I'm following this and this trust patterns, and then some of the points get done for you automatically.
So let me go back to that point you said earlier, though. So when you talk to why should I do it? So there's let's talk about who the why is. So let's go back to the very beginning of our conversation, and let me kind of level set the conversation here. So we started the dialogue by saying there's a ton of data being produced in the world that is incredibly valuable to everyone. It's valuable to me as an individual for my own personal insights. It's valuable to private institutions for product innovation, consumer insight, revenue generation opportunities, the ability to provide value-added services to which everybody wants. There's no doubt about that. It's incredibly important to government and public institutions for their ability to manage and create a secure and safe society, for them to be able to tax and to be able to run the services. So there's no doubt in the world that the data that's being produced is of great value. And we all agree on that, and we want that data to keep flowing. Where we are questioning today is, how do we do it in a way so the individual producing the data, their privacy is protected and that they are secure? You raise a really interesting issue about the monetization idea of it. Some camps say, hey, let people sell their data. And you're saying, no, never give your data away at all, because unless you choose to do so under your own terms, because that is potentially an issue for you to be damaging your privacy. So you want to make sure that you're doing that in an appropriate way. And so you're saying, I don't want to be, creating a monetization vehicle around itself, the data in itself, because doing so could create misaligned incentives, and potentially hurt certain categories of people within society. So the monetization aspect is, I, as an individual, have a lot of excess computing capacity in my life and network capacity in my life. And so with that in mind, not only will I store my own PolyPot on my devices, but in theory, I'm going to allow the union to be able to borrow from the computing capacity of my devices to be able to make all of this work. And so every time some insight or algorithm that's being produced or needs to be analyzed in order for a decision to be made, it may borrow computing power from somebody else in the network, and that person's getting paid for that. And so for me, it's starting to sound like a lot like Bitcoin mining, but for insights. I mean, is it not using the same kind of technology that we're actually using the computing power of people within the PolyPoly network for them to not necessarily mine Bitcoins, but to mine value being produced from personal data and insight?
I think one point that's really important is I'm just renting out my personal computing power. So
correct.
Even the co-op has no influence of.
No, I got it. It's your choice. But again, the mechanics though are a lot like a Bitcoin mining, if I'm not mistaken, that we're using the excess or the excess computing capacity I'm using the excess computing capacity on my devices. I'm agreeing to allow my devices to be used within the network to be able to produce the insights and decisions that need to be made. And for that, I'm getting paid. Yeah,
and some points, it's like this.
Yeah,
of
very
course,
cool.
Much less computing power than the Bitcoins.
Yeah.
That's a huge problem with Bitcoins.
And again, that might not be the greatest analogy, because you're right. Bitcoins has a big, but mechanically it's the same idea, right? It's the now you're saying it's
mechanism.
using
the mechanism is close to.
Yeah,
because I'm always getting like Bitcoin because one thing that is a part of the concept of a Bitcoin is never forget. And this is something that is fundamentally different than our project, because we want to embrace the right to forget.
Correct.
In the end. So that's because I'm always, when I hear about Bitcoin, so
yeah, no, and I saw that reaction, and I appreciated the correction there. So the mechanic of leveraging the decentralized ledger is similar, but you're not necessarily publishing so the decentralized ledger element is similar, but you're not necessarily publishing to a public ledger that then needs to be constantly maintained and all of that, which is where the Bitcoin piece comes into play. And we're not doing that in this example. We're just leveraging the mechanics of leveraging the decentralized processing power from all of the devices.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really very cool. So, where do we go from here? I mean, where does the next step come in? Like, where are we in terms of the maturity of the industry? How much of this is actually practically happening right now? Yeah, you've said it yourself already. You know, we're still in very early days.
Yeah.
So, what's next, and when to say, like, a large multinational corporation that's serving the mass population say, okay, this is big enough now for me to pay attention to, right?
Yeah.
So I'll hearken it to this example. When I started in the mobile industry, it was around 1987, 1988. And at that time, I started, and in 1999, I gave my first public speaking address. And the message I was delivering in that talk was that one day we would be consuming video and communicating in real time with people through my phone. And I was literally laughed off the stage. Everybody said, that's the stupidest idea in my life. You're nuts. That's never going to happen, right? And as they're pulling me off the stage, telling me I'm an idiot, I'm like, but it's going to happen. Really, it's going to happen. And then fast forward, that's exactly where we're at.
So in the end,
and similarly,
welcome on board, because we are the whole group of PolyPoly are idiots like this.
Exactly. And then similarly from a market, but a mass market perspective, I used to run the Mobile Marketing Association. And in the early days of trying to market to people through and with mobile devices, one of the biggest challenges we had was, the larger brand says, look, nobody's got a cell phone. No one's got a smartphone. No one's got data on their devices. And it wasn't until 2010 when we had 50% penetration of smartphones in the market and we started getting unlimited data plans that brands started to wake up and say, oh, okay, there is a mass market opportunity here, right? So I guess the point I'm trying to ask you is, at what point or what needs to happen for us to hit that mass market threshold? I mean, when can we actually start looking out into the world, and when will we start looking out in the world and say, all right, I get it. This decentralized method of me being able to manage my data is actually practical, it's real, and it's here. Like, are we there yet, or are we getting there? Where are we?
Yeah, so in the end, what we have here is a really, really big vision, because in the end, you have to be a bit crazy if you say, okay, we want to rebuild the complete data economy and build up a completely new decentralized data economy. I think the trick is.
Well, by the way, just so you know, though, you're not alone. I mean, Tim Berners-Lee, the person that founded the internet, is right there with you. So I mean, you're not alone, right?
No, of course we are not alone. But to found this and put it in a company, of course, it is. It's not like I could found, or the founders could have found something a bit smaller. Sure. I think it's something we can. So I think the important point is to put this in good pieces, so that every piece has a value in its own, and every piece brings it up to the vision. So there I can explain on the one hand, when we come to customer side right now. We have done the PolyPot, the base technology is already live. You can take it down in the app stores as well. In the app store, and Google and Apple. I think that was something that was really important for us to get the solved, because inside the PolyPot, there is a feature depot where we can load up new applications and functionalities inside the PolyPot. And this was very important to come in the app stores, because of course, Apple and Google don't say, have a look in the first time, say, oh, there's an app coming, can load other features. Okay. So that's the one point. The other point is we are at the moment in the awareness phase. So what we have done on the one hand is that we have to open the Poly Explorer. In the Poly Explorer, we are explaining right now how our data is handled and how our data is treated. And we are close to launching right now our first importer feature, the Facebook importer. We will launch by beginning of December. We are in the testing phase right now, together with our members in the cooperative. So our members are always working with us together. So, and the Facebook importer makes it possible to download your data from Facebook over GDPR, because you have the right to get all the data. But if you get the data from Facebook, normally you get HTML and JSON files. Nobody can really.
No human being can figure that out. Yeah. No normal human can figure that out, right?
For me, and perhaps for many others, JSON is somebody who is really, really evil and comes out of a horror film. So what we made here in the Facebook importer, we make transparent what it really means. So we have inside mini stories, we have infographics, and so on, that really explain what that means, with how many people your data get shared, how many messages you have sent it, what other companies have looked out, what is your value for advertisers, in which advertising categories you are in, what are your interests on, and so on. So we are making transparent here what Facebook knows about you. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, we have the Poly Explorer that makes transparent what the company is allowed to know about you, because there we got and read it through all the privacy declarations of the companies and make transparent in a way where it's readable what you really accept here. And this is something we can bring together then in the next step. After the Facebook importer on the B2C side, we will go with the next importers. So of course, I think that's really clear, and we will go through the big five in the first step. So Google, Amazon, and so on.
And so what does the individual now do with this data? So what's the next step? After I have control of my data, what's next?
Now, at the moment, you just get awareness about what is happening to your data. So we are not at the step that we really can say, okay, that we can send algorithms on the devices. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, we are going forward right now on the B2C approach, B2B approach, because we need to get companies on board. And of course, we have to generate money to develop this all further. Mm-hmm. What we are offering right now for companies is something we call a friendly data cleaning. Mm-hmm. What is the problem on company sides? Company really lose a lot of money when it comes to false data. Just for example, sending out a billing and people doing something like moving around or get married and change their surname or changing telephone number and so on. And so companies can't reach the clients anymore, for example, for billing and stuff like that. And that's a huge problem for companies. And the same problem is, and it's cost a lot of money to make the research. And on the other hand, they are not always really sure of if all the data they have are really GDPR compliant. Mm-hmm. And so what we offer here is a really simple mechanism. We give the companies the PolyPot as a possibility to send out the PolyPot to all their clients. The clients then can download their personal data from this company sending them the PolyPot. And then they can clean their data, make corrections, and the company incentivize them, for example, by 3 minutes or by a small income or something like that. So that's the first win-win situation for both sides. The company can be sure that the data is GDPR compliant. They can be sure they have the correct data. And on the other hand, the client can see, okay, this is the data the company have about me. There's no wrong data, and they get incentivized for being something like an outsourcing partner for data handling. So that's the B2B step. So when we have solved both of this, then of course the next point can be, okay, we have done a data cleaning with a company, a huge company with the clients. Then the clients can use, for example, the Facebook downloader to download their data. And then they have the possibility to give the data to the company they have done the data cleaning.
So in other words, and again, I've been talking about this for years, and so it's really great to see it being reflected back. And so the first stage is awareness.
Awareness.
Second stage is collection, right? So I'm aware, and then I start collecting my data.
Yeah.
The next stage then is, and I think the next stage, two things will happen in this next stage. The next stage, what I'm hearing you say is, one, in order to grow market, enterprises will start offering this to their clients and then incentivizing their clients to help them, the enterprise, to be maintain GDPR compliance, maintain data hygiene and data integrity. I think the next piece, which you didn't mention, but I think plays in this same role, is it's basically what I'll call the quantified self, right? There could be applications introduced that help me understand what all the data about me means. Like, I've collected all of this data about myself, but what do I do with it? Well, I think the whole industry of applications that will help me use my data to be able to understand myself and what's going on with that. And then there's this other piece, this next piece, which is the exchange piece, which you then start talking about, where I can start saying, send me an algorithm and I'll give you an answer back, or I'll granularly exchange data with you. And so so the graphic I'm seeing in my head is kind of these four steps: awareness, collection, what we'll call hygiene and analysis, and then exchange would be the kind of the natural progressions of industry. And what you've just said earlier is we're still at that. From an industry perspective, we're still at the very beginning in the collection stage. But yet obviously we're making incremental development in all of the other stages as well simultaneously. It's just so happens like, where are we right now? It's not that development's not happening in the future stages. It is. It's just going to take a while to get all of the pieces together. Did I summarize that okay?
It's a pretty good strategy to bring this puzzle together, let me say, and not lose track in them on. And as I said, the important thing is with every tiny step, you need to have a value for every player in the market. And of course, something like a data cleaning is a high value for companies. And to building up, let me say, a better relationship to your customer, a trusted relationship to your customer is so important for companies. And what we learned on our way as well, a lot of companies, they don't want to have all this data. They are collecting sometimes data they don't even want to have. If we, for example, think about people for car leasings, so big automotive brands, if they have, for example, leasing models. These cars are supercomputers as well. How many people really delete their data after the leasing contract runs out? That means the big automotive company gets always one computer after the other full of data they don't really want to have. So that means in the end, the economy is pretty open to our project. Not even because they get a better value of data, because the data comes from the source and not from anywhere else. They even are open for this project because they get stuck into data they don't really want to have. And we are losing our, we are not able to really work with all this data because the industry don't have all these analysts needed, all the know-how needed, really gets values out of the data. So what we are collecting here is more and more data rubbish. And this is another aspect of this concept, is I always name it data sustainability. Because what we are doing right now with our data is social harming. That's what we are talking about already, but it's economically and ecologically harming as well.
Mhm.
So economically, in the point, the number of data is growing and growing and growing constantly. And the quality of data is not growing. So you said you like numbers on some points. What we found out, not we, what Com Magazine found out. For example, when it comes to companies, there are three categories of data. There's the business critical data that are mostly clean data, rot data, so redundant, obsolete, and trivial data, and dark data. And what they found out, what we are collecting here right now, is around about 14% just business critical data. 32% is rot and dark, and 54% is dark data. That means we are talking here about that 85% of the data that are collected are useless. But they consuming computing power. They are consuming all the money that is needed to store all this data.
Yeah. Now, are you referring to I believe it's Veritas is the group that did that work, and they found that companies are spending billions of dollars in what you're calling dark and rot data. And that's just wasted opportunity. And so what you're saying is we could reclaim so much of that wasted energy and resource and money and storage capacity and processing capacity, as well as legal liability, by just getting rid of it all and just going directly to the source.
Yeah, that's what I mean with sustainability, because sustainability is more than just talking about not harming the environment. Sustainability is always economical, ecological, and a social aspect. And you won't have so much redundant or obsolete data because we don't store the same data set on thousands of different servers anymore.
Right. Fascinating. So, I mean, obviously we could continue on forever. I mean, this is a thrilling conversation, but I think we've gotten to a really nice point where essentially what we summarized is, using the Apollo 13 Tom Hanks quote, "Houston, we have a problem," right? We've got a really vibrant market for data. This data has incredible value for everyone. But we've got a problem, right? It's creating a data sustainability issue, both an economical one, ecological one, and a social one. Luckily, we do have a solution for that. It falls under this decentralized identity technology that's filled with a bunch of cryptology and math and that's where I think people get to this idea that it's complex. The nice thing about that, though, with applications like PolyPot, we can abstract the complexity by putting a really nice UI on it and and providing a really good user experience. So the average user doesn't need to know all of the mechanics. They just need to know that I'm protected and that I can actually collect my data, analyze my data, work with industry in a trusted way, and then exchange my data in a really clear and concise method that allows me to get the value that I'm looking for without compromising my privacy. And that's really the summary of our conversation. And I've found it just tremendously beneficial and very grateful for you taking the time.
Oh, thank you so much. And hopefully, I'm always happy. And I think I can talk for the whole team if we can manage to inspire other people, because in the end, what we need, of course, is a lot of help here. A lot of help getting awareness for this project. We are searching for members and even for a lot of know-how and experience, because we don't know everything. And so if you want to bring in your experience and so on, we are so open, because this is something we really want to bring for everybody out in the world. So.
And on that note, thank you very much. And we'll sure to call you back and check in and see how things are going.
That would be great. And perhaps the next time I'll bring one of the tech girls and boys.
Yeah, I'd love that. So again, Jessica, thank you very much for taking the time. I really appreciate it. Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.